This podcast is intended to provide information for educational purposes only and to serve as a starting point for you to have a conversation with your personal physician. Nothing stated on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Consult with your physician before undertaking or changing any treatment plan.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Pound of Cure Weight Loss Podcast. I am joined by Deidre, our nurse practitioner today. Hi, Deidre.
Hi.
Dr. Weiner is not going to be joining us today, but that's okay because we have a really exciting conversation in store talking about something that I think is kind of like a hot topic in the GLP-1 space and community right now, microdosing. So, Deidre, what would you kind of define microdosing as in relation to GLP-1s?
So microdosing is kind of a new and novel concept with medication in general. And that is, instead of following the manufacturer's dosing, which was predetermined by a research structure that used specified doses while getting approval from the FDA for these medications, microdosing means prescribing smaller, more controlled doses and increasing in smaller, slower increments to give patients more benefit from these medications, both in terms of less side effects and also kind of longer, more gradual control, in the case of GLP-1s, of their weight loss and their hunger and their cravings and their ability to kind of still enjoy those things while experiencing gradual weight loss. With manufactured dosing is not always possible. And so it's become very popular because of that. And you've seen it advertised probably all over the weight loss telemed community. A lot of major companies now are advertising microdosing with compounded medications. Smaller doses, incremental increases, less side effects, more control. So,
Well, and the reason why there are these recommended dosing goes back to what you said about getting it approved by the FDA. So basically they're doing these studies and then publishing their findings with the ultimate one goal of showing their results to get their med approved.
Yes, and they
right?
have to choose their doses. They can't just increase dosing based on what the patient's response is in these studies. They have to have
be controlled.
A set parameters, exactly. And then with the comparative control group that is not taking any medication, right? So you can't just say the patient's having side effects, let's only go up 0.5 milligram. You have to use the dosing that has been set in the beginning of the study so that the data is comparable, reproducible, basically.
Right.
And so that does not necessarily mean that is the best dosing structure or that works for every individual. And what microdosing allows you to do is it allows you to customize the medication dose based on the patient's response. So for GLP-1 medications specifically, is it controlling the patient's hunger? Is it controlling their cravings? Are they having side effects? Are they seeing weight regain? What is their pace of weight loss? And that's different for everybody. And that difference is based on age and genetics and hormones and, male or female, sex hormones basically, or, medications you're on, other comorbidities. It's based on a lot of different things. And so the one size fits all model that every drug company uses, because that's what you have to do in order to get approval, isn't always the best plan for every patient, because not every patient is the same. So
yeah, and we have that bell curve of response too, right? And you can correct my percentages, but about 10% that are non-responders, about 10% that are super responders, and then everybody in the middle, that 80% of patients who have to develop their own personal relationship with the help of a weight loss specific practitioner such as yourself and such as Dr. Weiner to understand what is that dose structure that's going to be best for them. And also, if you're seeing weight loss on this, if we're starting you out on the starting dose, but you're seeing great weight loss, we're not going to bump you up just because that's what the manufacturer dosing structure tells us to do, which I think is different than Obviously PCPs are great for so many things, but I have come across, I'm sure you have too, people who maybe started out on their medication, on the GLP-1s with their PCP, followed that manufacturer dosing structure, and then ended up going off of the medication prematurely because they had such bad side effects. Is that something that you feel like you see a lot?
I mean, we see that a lot, which is, I mean, just from the very start, we always do a little bit slower dosing structure than the manufacturer recommends. And part of the reason why manufacturers increase the dose every month is because or why the company recommends that in their studies is because they need to see results, right?
Yeah.
If there isn't a positive result better than the control group, then the medication is not considered effective and won't get approval. And so, they wouldn't necessarily want to extend the dosing if that patient at the end of the longer dose period is not experiencing weight loss. Also, there is a limitation to, in study length as well. Many studies are very long. They can be 2 or 3 years long for the length of, the amount of time the patient is on the medication. And so they're trying to compare not just the weight loss per month, but the weight loss once they've reached the max dose of the medication over the next year or two. And so there's limitations as well in terms of timing. And so again, that may not be the best structure for everybody. Generally, because of things like side effects and pattern of weight loss, most people actually do have fewer side effects and more weight loss being on a longer dosing structure. And the community kind of does that off-label without, outside of the manufacturer's guidelines, because what we find is that that's what's beneficial for our patients. Not for every patient, because the low responders, which are probably more than 10%, probably closer to like 15%, may need to go faster or more quickly. And people who are super responders may not ever go up from the lowest dose because they over respond to the medication, so they tend to have a lot of side effects. They also lose a lot of weight, so it's a catch-22. But that is what microdosing allows you to manage those two different patients, or anyone in between, because they're going to need different dosing structures, and they're going to need different, increments of dose increase. The low responder might need to go up 1 to 2 milligrams at a time. The super responder may only need to go up 0.25 milligrams if they go up at all. So it makes it very flexible and customizable.
Yeah, but Big Pharma is not happy about it.
Because you make less money when you stay on a low dose for a long time.
Right.
Right. So.
We were looking at an article earlier today, and we can link it in the show notes. The name of the article is Pharma Prevails in Dispute Over Weight Loss Microdose Marketing. And this is from eMarketer. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Right. So Eli Lilly sued a telehealth company, Noom, because Noom was advertising that they repackaged the Zepbound, tirzepatide, so that they can microdose. And in their advertising, they stated that microdosing was more beneficial than manufacturer dosing. Now, we know from practice that people probably do lose a little bit more weight more gradually and have less side effects.
And save more money.
Right. But because tirzepatide is copyrighted by Eli Lilly, and that brand protection doesn't end for 12 more years, till the 2030s, then you cannot say that your product, which is technically not the approved use, is better than what they've found in their research and their recommendations. And so they sued Noom, and Noom had to change their branding and their advertisement for that. Doesn't mean that it's not the best way to go or that it doesn't work for a lot of people, but they just basically broke the copywriting protection law.
And it doesn't mean they're not doing it. It just means that they're not advertising it anymore.
Right, exactly. They just changed the way they just changed their wording on their website, basically.
So let's talk a little bit more about which patients really excel with microdosing specifically, because I think, like, based on what you're saying, we see it with a big majority of patients, because our ultimate goal and your ultimate goal working with patients is getting them the best results, but for the least amount of side effects, so it's most sustainable and also financially sustainable.
Right. So, I mean, I think every patient could benefit from microdosing, because there have been many studies that show that most weight loss happens with these medications in the first half of the manufacturer dosing. And people tend to lose less weight per dose as they get on higher doses for various reasons. You know, there hasn't been a lot of studies that prove that there's medication tolerance, but certainly I think we see some of that. Also,
Anecdotally, yeah.
Right. Also, you're at a lower weight as you go through the dosing because you've already lost a lot of weight, and so your body loses more gradually anyway. And so people, you know, I hear from patients all the time that I lost the most weight when I first started a GLP-1, and it's not as effective now. Well, when you're microdosing, you're going up so gradually that your weight loss is just gradual and consistent over a long period of time. And so you still lose a comparable amount of weight, but you just lose it over a year instead of 3 months. And that makes it much more sustainable because in that time, you're building the healthy habits, lifestyle changes, nutrition, activity to help you maintain that weight loss a year down the line. Also, what happens is that people are able to achieve their weight loss goals at a much lower effective dose than if you're following the manufacturer's dosing. And that also gives some long-term sustainability once you're in the maintenance period, right? Your body has not become accustomed to these super high doses of, added GLP and GIP hormone. And so you're able to have a little leadway later on if you need to increase your dose or go back down. And then side effects. I mean, I see time and time again patients going up quickly, every month and experiencing a lot of side effects of the medications their body has not had time to acclimate. And you may not see it in the low responding group, but even in an average responder, it is common to experience things like nausea and, abdominal pain, especially if you're not using the right nutrition. That could be a real problem. And so spreading the dosing out gives your body much more time to acclimate. And so people have very few side effects when microdosing.
Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear your thoughts too. I was just thinking about this as you were talking about the gradual weight loss. So if somebody is not using a GLP-1, let's say they're just losing weight through lifestyle changes alone, generally, I like to see that weight loss more slowly because it gives their body that time to adjust their set point to, basically how I like to explain it is like, let your body know that it's safe and not in danger by more slowly and gradually losing weight. So you're around that, let's say, 0.5 pound to a pound of weight loss per week. And then therefore you're not as quick to regain it because your body feels safe at its new weight. Then when we layer on the GLP-1s, yeah. So would you say that like layering on the GLP-1s now with bariatric surgery, it's different because I know quicker weight loss up front is an indicator of overall total body weight loss. But with the GLP-1s, would you say it's kind of similar in that metabolic adaptation and that set point adjustment is actually better for long-term results and long-term weight maintenance?
Absolutely. My patients who when we employ microdosing, those patients are very successful over a very long period of time. And going into maintenance dosing, once they reach the weight they're comfortable at, is very easy. Their bodies have become accustomed to the medication. Even spreading out their dosing and taking it less frequently, their hunger is still controlled, their cravings are still controlled, and the weight regain, or the percentage of weight regain, is much lower. I think you're absolutely right. It does work the same way metabolically in that it's lowering your set point at a much slower pace, and your body has a longer period to adjust. And so just like with crash dieting or fad dieting, you lose a lot and then you also regain very fast. And we don't see that as much with the microdosing. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you also brought up another point that I really want to hone in on here too, which is the power of the lifestyle change. And you maybe have heard me say this before, and I'm sure you say this too, but we have this really powerful tool being the GLP-1s, whether we're microdosing or otherwise. Mm-hmm. But the tool alone is not the end all be all. And maybe at those higher doses, it feels a little bit more like, hey, here's this magic pill and I don't have to try that hard. But with microdosing, that combining the tool with the lifestyle change for that long-term success is so much more important for that weight loss on that journey as well. Because maybe you're only at that low dose and you're microdosing, which helps minimize the cravings and the food noise and hunger, but you still are then putting in the work, they're putting in the repetitions as if you're trying to get a muscle stronger. You need to work this muscle of changing nutrition habits, of changing lifestyle habits, exercise, etc., so that you are having the help from the tool to make it easier to make these lifestyle changes. But then, as I say, if and when this tool goes away or you go down on dose or whatever, you then have this whole new set of habits that are just ingrained when you had the help to make it easier to maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I don't just think, I see that patients who are eating a whole food diet, heavy in lean proteins, heavy in fruits and vegetables, heavy in fiber especially, those patients have a much easier time controlling their hunger and cravings when spreading the dose out and their maintenance dosing than patients who have not made the nutrition changes. There are many times I see patients whose weight loss has kind of slowed or even plateaued over, on the higher doses. They're on Zepbound 10, 12.5, 15, but not losing, sometimes even gaining, because they're just relying on the medication to make those changes, and they have poor nutrition. They never made the nutrition and lifestyle changes that would have helped them over this time that they've been on the medication. And so not only to maximize your weight loss benefit on the lower doses, but also to help control your hunger and help control your cravings. And, nutrition is so, so important. The medication is just a tool. It's not the it's not the end answer, right?
Right.
Even without medication, eating a whole food diet high in fiber and protein and fruits and vegetables helps control your hunger, right? We all
and
know
your food noise.
Yes, and your food noise, and it changes the way your mind thinks. Suddenly you're not craving things that are high in sugar or carbs anymore because, or refined carbohydrates, because your mind knows that, or your body knows that that's going to not make you feel good, right? It's going to increase your blood sugar. You're going to have too high of an insulin response. And so your mind learns to crave fruits and vegetables, learns to crave, my example is when I'm at TMC now, I really want chickpeas. I can't wait to get to lunch and have chickpeas, and I don't have that reactive hypoglycemic reaction after lunch that I used to have before I started eating a whole food diet and eating things like chickpeas that are full of fiber at lunch, because my glucose is now steady instead of spiking and dropping after lunch, which was what was happening before when I was eating more processed foods. So, and that's without medication, right? So the medication allows you to get to that point. It changes your taste. It changes the way you view food. It changes the way you don't have the same cravings. You're not hungry, and that allows you to make the right choices, right? Now you're not suddenly grabbing or reaching for a muffin or, whatever chips, at TMC, right? You're satisfied until lunch, and then you can say, I think I'm going to have a salad with chickpeas on top instead of whatever is available at that moment. So
Yeah.
and that's where I think the real benefit is, not necessarily for the weight loss, because eventually you'll get to the point where you're at the weight you're comfortable with, and you won't probably be losing anymore. Eventually you get to a point where you plateau on the dose you're at, and to maintain that, having the good nutrition is really going to be the most important thing, I think.
Yeah. And also something that we haven't actually mentioned yet, but that microdosing compared to standard dosing, I find extra good at, is that combined with the nutrition and lifestyle piece is the muscle preservation. So that's a huge pain point for so many people on these medications, and it's a buzzworthy topic these days of how do I preserve my muscle tissue. And when you're on when you're microdosing and making sure you're eating a whole foods diet, heavy in lean protein, heavy in fiber, and strength training, we know how important that is.
Absolutely.
You can maybe preserve some of your muscle by eating enough protein, but you're certainly not going to be building any muscle or even preserving as much as you can if we're not combining the protein intake with the stimulus on your muscle via strength training. So anybody who's on GLP-1s, whether you're microdosing or not, and I like to say everybody, if you're safe to do so, even if you're whatever, like everybody needs to be strength training, but especially if you're concerned about losing your muscle, which is a conversation I have over and over again.
Right. And losing lean muscle mass isn't just about the way you look. It is dangerous. It can affect bone health, right? It's a
Yeah.
rapid weight loss. It has a much higher, people who have rapid weight loss have a much higher risk of osteoporosis and osteopenia. It affects your cardiac health. It can cause hypotension. It can cause, heart arrhythmia. It can cause hypoglycemia episodes, low blood sugar episodes. So, rebuilding that lean muscle mass that you lose when you lose weight rapidly is so, so important. And I think that you're absolutely right, that it's a lot easier to manage that when you're losing weight more gradually, versus you also don't have any energy when you lose 60 pounds in a month because it takes so much energy. So
exactly.
it's much more difficult to rebuild than to just maintain your lean muscle
Yeah.
mass. So.
Yeah, and our new app, Lowly Weight Loss. If you're new and you haven't heard about it, or maybe you haven't looked into it yet, or you're one of our patients and you know how great it is, search Lowly Weight Loss on the App Store. And what we've really done with this app, this version, is combined not just the nutrition piece and the lifestyle piece, but also the microdosing piece and the weight loss support from that comprehensive look. So, you can chat with Lowly, ask questions, you can track your food, but in a way that is supportive and actually teaching you how to change your habits rather than just focusing on how many calories you're having. And also, like, the two extra cool pieces that I specifically like are our learning courses, where you can have that on demand, like, how do I learn about whatever it is, maybe with your GLP-1s or bariatric surgery or nutrition. And then we also have the schedule. Like, that's similar to how we previously had the schedule with the support groups, but we've actually changed something. So we've decreased how many groups and actually changed it more so to on-demand one-on-one. So we call it office hours. And it's basically, think about it as a virtual walk-in clinic where you can join in at any time that you see that we're online. So you can come and talk with me about your nutrition and lifestyle. You can come and ask Deidre questions about microdosing or your GLP-1s or whatever. We also have Terry, our health coach, who's more so on the mindfulness and meditation and kind of overall lifestyle changes. And then we also have our peer leaders who, again, transitioned to doing office hours support, so more one-on-one conversations as opposed to that more maybe intimidating group class style. So lots of cool stuff on our new app, and we've put a lot of work into it, haven't we, Deidre?
Yes, we have. And this is what's great about our practice is that I have so many patients that were just getting medications with no support. And then they're missing that extra piece, right? They're missing the peer support. They're missing the good nutrition. They're missing you can read all you want about GLP-1s and good nutrition, but how do you implement that, right? How do you start an exercise program if you've never exercised before? How do you start eating a whole foods diet, with your family? If you don't have that support, you're missing that whole component. And then you plateau with your medication. The medication as a tool has reached this limit. Then what do you do?
Exactly.
Right? How do you maintain that weight loss or achieve more weight loss? So
right. So we'll have the links in the show notes here in case you want to check it out. We're really proud of what we built, but more so, just what Deidre said. It's about giving the support to this community of people who we know need it. So anyway, thanks for being here with me today, Deidre. It was so great to do the show with you.
We're talking.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. And I'm sure we'll be chatting again soon. And for anybody listening who found this valuable, please share it with somebody who you think would find it helpful as well. We're really excited to continue to support you and our community in every way that we can. And we appreciate you being here. So we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.